Good afternoon. I'm Roger Siddle. I'm the Chair of the Board of Trustees for Action for ME. Welcome to our AGM 2021. And I'm afraid I have to open with an apology. Our meeting is going to be shorter than originally published. Executive Sonia Chowdhury, I'll wait for a few entrants. Our Chief Executive Sonia Chowdhury has recently, I'm afraid, been taken unwell, and she is going to be unable to join us today. As a result, we're not going to take all the items on the published agenda. We will cover the statutory items, including a report on the year just gone and the Treasurer's report. We're clearly, though, not able to have the Chief Executive's forward view on the years to come and our emerging strategy, nor do we feel that we can take questions in that area. And so we will not be doing the Q&A session at the end of the meeting that we'd originally planned. We will arrange a separate session to cover this off as soon as feasible. And my apologies, I hope that the attendees understand. So to move us into the formalities of the AGM, obviously, due to the ongoing situation with the pandemic, we have decided to hold the AGM online for a second year. It is being recorded so that those unable to attend can watch later through our website and social media. Only those presenting will be visible in the film. And minutes of the meeting are being taken by our Office Manager, Stacey Vincent. I'd like to welcome our trustees and formally recognise that we've received some apologies for absence from Phil Murray, Lucy Goodwill, Matt Simons, Alison Deeth, Ed Stevens, and Sue Hardy. So the first item on our agenda is the minutes of the last meeting. It's a long time ago, but if there are any comments or amendments that people think should be made, please raise your hand or to type into the chat function. I'm going to take that as there are no comments. We will formally resolve that the presented draft minutes are an accurate record of the meeting held on the 15th of October 2020. So now, rather than handing over to Sonia for the Chief Executive's report for 2021, I'm going to hand over to Ruth Richardson, our Operations Director. She will be followed by Philip Marsden, our Treasurer, with the Treasurer's report. If you have questions specifically on their reports as you go through, please do type them into the chat function, and we will take those at the end of Philip's presentation before moving on to the other formal items. And with that, over to Ruth.
Thank you, Roger. I'll just wait for the slides to appear on screen. Sorry, forgive us for the delay. We started in a moment.
Can you see those, Ruth?
No.
Okay, excuse me. Bear with me, everybody. Apologies. How about now?
Thank you.
Right, just going to go to presenter view. Okay, there we go.
So welcome everybody, I'm Ruth Richardson. I am the Deputy Chief Executive of Action for ME, and I'm going to give you a flavour of the work that we did through financial year 2020 to 2021, which was of course a year like no other. If you're interested in finding out more about our work during that year, then our annual report will soon be available on the website for you to have a look at, and we will also be sending it to all of the people who have attended today. This year, our charity has been a lifeline through lockdown. As the impact of the pandemic was felt, we remodelled all of our services and concentrated as much resource as we could into our frontline services. New needs rapidly emerged for the ME community that we served. Many practical needs that we hadn't felt before. For example, people who had previously been reliant on shopping supermarket deliveries suddenly saw these drying up as everyone was trying to access them. And we also heard from many people whose social care packages were reduced or removed as a result of furlough and cuts through the pandemic. In April and May alone, we saw a 30% increase in inquiries to our helpline services. Throughout our strategy, the first pillar of our support has been improving lives, and I'm going to give you an overview of the key services that we deliver for people with ME. This year, we saw 1,754 inquiries through our information and support services. 31% of those inquiries were unsurprisingly related to COVID-19. A further 31% were about the health or were around health or the symptoms of ME. And we also saw 23% of inquiries related to applying for welfare benefits, particularly as the economic impacts of the pandemic were felt. The quote at the bottom of this slide represents a lot of the feedback that we get from clients who finally feel that they don't need to justify themselves or to explain their condition before they seek help. Alongside our frontline services, we also supported 53 adults with ME through our advocacy service, many of these long-term, working with clients for 6 months and upwards. We were delighted to receive 100% satisfaction rate with this service, and also 91% of people that accessed it reported improved health and well-being. We heard yesterday that one of our severely affected clients has just been granted funding for continuing healthcare after an intensive piece of work by our team that lasted over 2.5 years. We also supported them with a ruling from the Ombudsman that was upheld after a complaint was made against the care that she received as a result of misunderstanding and a lack of and some ignorance around ME. In our work with children and young people, we work with 168 families, 75% of whom said they increased their understanding of their rights and options through accessing our services, and 75% also felt more confident communicating with professionals. Sadly, this year we saw a significant increase in young people coming to our services with suicidal thoughts as the severe isolation experienced through lockdown exacerbated the isolation already experienced by this group of people. We recently worked with one family who, despite being in very regular contact with their school, was subject to a welfare check by the school staff turning up unannounced at their doorstep because they were treating ME as an attendance issue and didn't understand the severity of impact on the child. We're now working with the family to help the school better understand their child's needs. Also, through our Improving Lives work, this year saw the start of our Breaking Isolation workshops for children and young people, which are funded by Children in Need. This was a really exciting project for us, as right from the outset, we co-designed and we co-delivered these workshops with young people, making sure that they designed it and told us exactly what they needed to make new friends and to break the isolation that they experience. We had 24 young people take part in the workshops this year, and I'm delighted to say that we've got a further 2 years funding for this project to improve on the work that started last year. Of those who took part in the workshops, 66% reported reduced loneliness, 61% reported increased self-esteem, and 50% said that they were better able to build positive relationships with other young people. And you can see these lovely quotes in the boxes here. The yellow quote is from a child that participated in the workshop, and the orange quote is from a parent. And we really wanted to make sure we captured both the impact on the child themselves, but also the wider family. Managing ME is not an individual, it often takes a whole family around that. So we're delighted that these workshops had a positive impact both on the young people themselves and their parents and other siblings. The second pillar of our work is inspiring action. I'm going to give you an overview of some of our medical education work last year, and also the work that we did around NICE consultation around the draft guidelines that were released in November last year. We often hear about the lack of understanding from the medical profession when it comes to ME. And as a result, we were delighted to receive some funding from Scottish Government for a Learn About ME project that aimed to increase understanding around medical professionals with ME, around ME. We disseminated an online module developed by Dr. Nina Muirhead, which was 1 hour and focused on diagnosis and management of ME symptoms. And during the 5-month pilot project, over 600 health professionals completed this module. We did this project in partnership with other ME charities and promoted it widely amongst our networks in Scotland. It was also accompanied by a podcast series, which had both professionals and patients talking about their experience of diagnosis and management of their condition, and particularly the importance of patient-led care. The quote on the screen is from one of the health professionals who completed the module. And when we surveyed the health professionals who had taken part, 77% reported increased confidence in the treatment and management of ME, and also 75% reported increased confidence in diagnosing ME. In terms of the NICE guidelines, we had 1,500 people with ME and their carers and our supporters responding to a survey on the draft guidelines, from the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence, or NICE. We used their insight and experience in our consultation response, which challenged some areas of the guideline and endorsed others. We were, of course, shocked and hugely disappointed that the guideline was unexpectedly delayed at the very last minute. As part of our collaboration with Forward ME Charities, we have shared the concerns of the wider ME community directly with NICE, who have now announced that they will host a roundtable discussion to better understand the issues raised and determine how it can gain support for the guideline to ensure effective implementation. If the roundtable event doesn't reach the desired outcome, with full publication of the new guideline as it stands, we will, as part of Forward ME, take every possible step to ensure that the final guideline in their current form are published in full. The last strand of our work under this 5-year strategy is investing in change. It was a very exciting year for us as we saw the launch of the Decode ME project, or the start of the planning, and also PSP, as well as further work around the 2 PhDs that we fund. The Decode ME project is the world's largest DNA study of ME. £3.2 million of funding has been received from the Medical Research Council and the National Institute for Health Research for this programme. So far, over 29,000 people have signed up to receive regular updates. And of those, we believe about 91%, which is 26,450, meet the minimum requirements to get involved in the study. This Twitter screenshot is one of just the thousands of responses the Decode ME team have had from people with ME who are so excited about the study. We're also hoping to work with around 40 support group contacts and 240 or more social media ambassadors to ensure that we promote the study widely enough to get the numbers required. The priority setting partnership we are funded to facilitate is working collaboratively with people with ME and clinicians to identify the top 10 priorities for ME research. We had more than 1,500 responses to a survey that was put out, with people suggesting over 2,000 research ideas. This is a huge job now, as these are being sorted and collated before they will be shared in a second survey that will go out to the ME community, and we will ask them to prioritise these research questions. The quote at the bottom of this screen is from a member of the PSP steering group, which is made up of people with ME, their carers, healthcare professionals, and representatives of various ME organisations, plus people from the James Lind Alliance and a coordinator who is helping us launch this project. Lastly, our 2 funded PhD students, Joshua and Marissa, have now completed their 2nd year. Both projects did experience delays as a result of the pandemic, so will now finish up to a year later than planned. We know that opportunities to stay in the ME field after completing a PhD are virtually non-existent, so we forged a partnership with the US charity Solve to co-fund a transatlantic fellowship. Lastly, we can't talk about investing in change without a nod to our fundraising successes this year. In our strategy, we promised to raise £3 to £5 for every pound that's spent on fundraising in the charity, which to grow our income streams and deliver much needed services and support and campaign for change. During 2020-2021, we raised £10.37 for every single £1 invested in fundraising, which is a significant increase from last year. Despite the challenges posed by the pandemic, this year our income exceeded £1 million, and we also ran our most successful Christmas fundraising campaign ever, raising over £169,000 from just under 620 individual donations. Our campaign ranked 5th out of more than 760 charities taking part, and we also won an award from Big Give for the campaign that we ran, which resulted in further income for the charity. We are hugely grateful to our amazing community fundraisers who year on year deliver amazing events and activities to support our work. People like Emma, who asked friends and families to take on a fundraising challenge on her behalf for her 50th birthday. She called it Sofa Fundraising, and this picture shows her friends video calling her while undertaking the challenges. And also 11-year-old Sunny, whose mum has ME. Sunny set himself the challenge to raise £100 by cycling 100 miles in different stages. We actually raised nearly 6 times that total. So thank you so much to Emma and Sunny and all of our community fundraisers for the vital work that you do. I'm now going to hand over to Philip Marsden, our treasurer, who will take a more in-depth look at our finances from last financial year.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Philip Marsden and I'm your treasurer. I'm going to take you through our financial results for the last year. That's the year to 31st of March, 2021. Sorry, we're just trying to move the slides on. There we are. We have the next slide. I apologize for that. Firstly, here is our income and expenditure in the form of a bar chart for the last 5 years. The green columns are income and the yellow columns are expenditure. And then obviously the difference between the green and yellow columns is the difference between the income and expenditure, which is our surplus or deficit each year. And you can see how it goes up and down in the last 5 years. Just going back to the previous year, that's 2020 for a comparison, you'll see in 2020 that income had come down from the previous year, 2019. That was mainly because we didn't get we didn't get any exceptional legacies in 2020, and we didn't have a fundraising dinner either, which we had in the previous year. And so in 2020, expenditure came down. We reduced expenditure as well to make sure that we were near break even at the end of the year. In 2021, wow, that was a roller coaster year, a real roller coaster this year that we're looking at. We started the year with plunging income during the first lockdown, and potentially it could have been a dire situation. So we took quick action to cut back expenditure. We furloughed staff and we didn't replace some open positions. So we reduced staffing by doing that by roughly 40%. We also benefited from the government's furlough funding, which was very helpful. And we did later on make a small number of redundancies. We concentrated our effort, particularly during that first half of the year, we concentrated our resources on our crisis support and advocacy service. And you can see the effect of our cost reductions in the yellow bar, showing that we'd cut back very significantly. Now, on the income side, we had benefited particularly from the Big Give and a lot of other initiatives towards the end of the year. So by the end of the year, the roller coaster, which had moved down, had moved up again. And thanks to these fundraising initiatives, we had a very successful second half. It really was a game of two halves. And income recovered hugely in that second half. So in the year as a whole, we ended up our income was 20% ahead of the original budget at 1,192,000. And it was 26% up on 2020. So we achieved a £360,000 surplus, which was tremendous effort by our fundraising team and by all our staff. Now let's look at our income in a little more detail. So this is how the £1,192,000 of income was made up. The big yellow slice there is donations and legacies, and that makes up the greatest part of our income. And it was 20% up on 2020. So we did a lot better in that area. The green slice is charitable activities, and that's basically subscriptions from members and publications and so on, always a smaller part of our income. The blue slice is other income, and this was much higher than it was in 2020. In fact, it was only 36,000 in 2020, and it's 111,000 in 2021. This is because of the reimbursement of the costs of setting up the Decode ME research project. So we had income from that to reimburse us for our costs. And there's also the income from the government-funded furlough scheme goes into that category as well. And so if we move on now to look at donations and legacies, which is that large slice in a little more detail. We're just going to move the slide on. Thank you. So here we have donations and legacies in more detail. The lime yellow slice on the top left corner there is trust donations. So that's donations from trusts, which is a very steady income for us. And that was, again, similar to 2020. By the end of the year, I can tell you it had dropped lower in the first half, but we caught up in the second half. The orange slice, it's the top right slice, is donations. And that was up 11% on the previous year. And it included Big Give, which generated £170,000 in itself, compared to 144,000 the previous year. So that was well up. Tremendously successful Big Give. Thank you to all our donors through that. It's a fantastic performance. And we also in that section is our community fundraising, which suffered particularly in the lockdowns. Clearly, we couldn't gain income from marathons and bike races and so on. So that particular area was well down. Big Give more than compensated. The yellow slice, which is to the bottom right, is legacies. They continued at a similar level to 2020, which was a reasonably high level. And the blue slice is tax recoverable. Donations went up, so tax recoverable also went up, which is great. And then finally, that green slice on the bottom left corner is grant income. And that was 300% up on the previous year, so 3 times as much in 2021 as the previous year. And that was principally due to the reimbursement of costs for managing the steering group for the priority setting partnership. And it also included funding for our Mentor ME project in Scotland. So much higher income there. Now, if we turn to the expenditure side, and total expenditure was 832,000. Total expenditure, for the reasons I explained earlier, reduced overall by 16% in 2020. So that was because of furloughing, not replacing certain positions, and a few redundancies. So expenditure came out 16% less. And when we look at that bar, the pie chart there, the very large sort of mango colored slice there is charitable activities. Charitable activities is basically all the things that we want to do as a charity. So it's our crisis support and advocacy services, for adults and children, campaigning and research. And I'll come back to that in a little bit more detail in a moment. The blue slice is the cost of generating our income. And the cost of generating our income reduced by 11% because we cut back on costs. And in the end, that meant that for every £1 we spent in cost, we raised over £10 in income, which is really exceptional. It was £7 for each £1 of cost in 2020. And really, one would normally expect more like £5 or even less of income for each £1 expended. So That was a tremendous performance by our staff team. And that didn't include, I should point out, all the income for instance, the Decode ME project, or the PSP projects, because they were not going through our accounts, although we were helping to co-lead and manage them. So that was millions of pounds on top of that. Now, some further detail of that sort of mango colored slice, which was around 80% of our costs there. So if we go to charitable activities, on this pie chart, we show the breakdown of that. So charitable activities account for over 80% of our expenditure. So it's most of what we spend. Now, the biggest part of that, which is the yellow slice there on the top left-hand side, that biggest part, which is about 2/3, is information and support. This is largely our crisis support and advocacy services for adults and children. So the largest part went on there. Ruth has covered that very well, and it's well detailed in the trustees report as well. Overall, the costs of that were reduced by 6% compared to 2020, because we were able to obtain cost reductions. The blue slice is campaigning and influencing, and the costs of that reduced by 63% this last year. So this area bore the brunt of our cost savings. And the green slice is biomedical research. Now that more than doubled in expenditure compared with 2020, as we spent more on, for instance, the PhD studentships and so on. And as I say, that expenditure does not include anything on Decode ME or the other projects which we are co-managing. Finally, a look at the accumulated funds. Now, accumulated funds are our capital and reserves for the future. And you can see how those funds go up and down according to whether we run a surplus or deficit during the year. This, of course, we had the large surplus of £360,000. So our funds in total have gone up by that amount. Looking at the actual bar, the top section, that yellow section at the top for 2021, is restricted reserves. The restricted reserves are those funds given to us which are restricted by their donors to specific projects, so spending on specific projects. It might be research, children's services, advocacy. Those are examples of the types of restricted income that we receive. And those restricted funds at the end of the year total 277,000. The blue section at the bottom is our general funds. These are unrestricted funds which we can spend on any purpose. They total 268,000 at the end of the year. And the green section in the middle is what we call designated funds. Now, these are unrestricted amounts of money, so they're like general funds, but we have chosen to designate the funds for the spending on specific things moving forward. And that money will help towards mitigating any further problems from the ongoing pandemic. Let's hope there are none, but particularly for the strategy which we'll be launching for the next 5 years. So we've got those funds already designated for that. Just looking at how our reserves relate to our spending, our annual spending, which is a measure which all charities use. The unrestricted general funds, that's the blue section at the bottom, represented 7.3 months of monthly unrestricted expenditure, which is substantial. And in addition, we had another 9.3 months worth of expenditure within the designated funds. That's the green section. So overall, we had over 16 months worth of expenditure, which is high. But then we've got high spending requirements coming up because we're going to be investing in expansion. So the conclusion is that we have plenty of reserves for the future. Therefore, we are looking at a very exciting future for this charity. This is my last AGM as treasurer, as I will be stepping down at the end of the AGM coming up soon. And I'll be handing on to the new treasurer, but our chairman will be saying a little bit more about that. Thank you very much.
Stop sharing now. Just have a look.
Okay.
Just waiting for Roger.
I just say, are there any questions on the treasurer's report? Or I hand back to Roger.
So we're just having some trouble accessing the chat. Bear with us. And I think there were some questions that we had in advance that we might want to look at. No, okay. Bear with me a second.
I will hand over to Roger now.
So actually, let me again reiterate some thanks to Philip. He mentioned that this was his last treasurer's report. Philip joined Action for ME as trustee and treasurer in 2012, and his role was exceptionally extended for a third term in 2018. So he has given 9 years service to the charity. He'll be stepping down as treasurer immediately following the AGM. He will be relinquishing his role as a trustee later in the year after the conclusion of a couple of specific projects. But I want to take this chance now to thank him formally for all that he has given to Action for ME, for all that he has given to the ME community during this time. He's made a massive contribution. And frankly, I'd like to thank him personally for the support that he has given me in this chair role. So I'm not quite sure a virtual round of applause possibly is called for, but thank you, Philip. Your assistance has been enormously important. Now I need to move on to some formal items around the trustees. Firstly, we have a proposal for the reappointment of trustees. Matt Simons, Phil Murray, Colin Batten and Alison Death as continuing members and trustees of the charity subject to the result of the postal ballot. And the result of the postal ballot is as follows. Matt Simons, 23 for, 1 against, 9 no preference. Phil Murray, 31 for, 2 against, no preference. Colin Batten, 26 for, 1 against, 6 no preference. Alison Death, 28 for, 1 against, 4 no preference. So those trustees are all reappointed for another 3-year term. Secondly, we have a proposal for the appointment of Jonathan Manuel and Sean Deboo as new members and trustees of the charity, subject to the result of the postal ballots to be put to the meeting individually. Jonathan Manuel, 22 yes, 3 no, 8 no preference. And for Sean, 24 yes, 4 no, 5 no preference. So both Jonathan and Sean are confirmed as trustees of the charity for a 3-year term. And please also note that Jonathan will be taking over Philip's role as treasurer at the end of this AGM. Finally, on the trustee front, we have a proposal for the appointment of David Lee for 1 year, and that will be ratified with a postal ballot to be undertaken prior to the next AGM. So David joins the board. We have to approve the appointment of our auditors, Moore Stevens. I will just hold to see if there are any objections to that appearing in the chat. Doubt, let's see. So we approve the appointment or the reappointment of Moore Stevens as our auditor. and we authorise the Board of Trustees of the charity to fix the remuneration of the auditors. So that brings us to the end of the formal part of the agenda now. And again, apologies for curtailing the AGM at this point. But I think I would say, as you've heard, your charity is in very good health. There are a number of challenging but exciting opportunities for the charity going forwards, amongst which are the increasing public awareness of ME, the links between long code and ME, the issues around the as yet unpublished NICE guidelines, the continued development of Decode ME, and a potential merger that we have announced with the ME Trust to be able to expand significantly the services we can offer. There is a very full agenda. I am very sorry that we have not had a chance to discuss it today, but hopefully you understand why that it is inappropriate to do so in Sonia's absence. And we will set up a further opportunity to discuss this with addressing Q&A that had been received in advance of this meeting as soon as we possibly can. But let me reassure you, the trustees and the team here intend to remain focused on the highest priorities to ensure equity and increased support for people with ME. So I think it is time for me to conclude by saying final thanks to our staff and volunteers for all their fantastic work, to my fellow trustees for their volunteering time and support. Once again, Philip for his very significant contribution over the years, to our donors and supporters, to Alan and Overy, who have given us more than 17 years of ongoing support, and hopefully will give us room to hold an in-person AGM again one day in the future. And thank you to all of you for coming, and thank you in advance for your coming to our next session when we can do the Q&A on looking forward for the charity. And with that, I'll bring the AGM to a close. Thank you very much.